like to call the meeting to order, please. Please stand for the pledge.
Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated, and we'll take a moment of silence. Thank you. Let's do the roll call. I think Commissioner Stephen was supposed to join us, but I don't believe he has called in yet. So we'll begin with Commissioner Culberson.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
I am here. Commissioner Smith.
Here.
All right. Public comment. Elaine Bellardo, come on up.
Thank you, Commissioner, for recognizing me. I am Elaine Bellardo, the co-founder of the Deeper Window Association. My partner of 29 years, Jose Bellardo, has passed from the disease of Alzheimer's, but I remain active in pursuit of what this county needs. I have gone and I have been an advocate at the state level. I will continue to be an advocate at the national level, but locally what we have coming tomorrow is the University of Kansas Alzheimer's and Disease Research Center. They are the top, they are the best, and they are doing groundbreaking work at KU, and they have chosen to come to Leavenworth County, and we should be there. If you're not touched by the disease, you should be there, not because you're going to bring hope, because you're the embodiment of hope for people that are living with the disease. So I am inviting you to be there tomorrow, right across the street at First United Methodist Church. It is 1 hour. The film is 36 minutes, and it will be followed by a 30-minute Q&A. So it is 1 hour of your week, and I'm just asking you to be there. I have brought flyers to remind you of this opportunity, but it is it's a privilege when the leaders of research come to you. Most times you have to go to them, but they have chosen to come to us. So I would like for you as leadership to consider being there, please.
Thank you. I will absolutely be there tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine.
What was the time?
It's tomorrow at 6:30
Tomorrow at 6:30. And can I just leave some flyers?
Yes, please.
Let me ask you a question. Are you George's sister?
I am.
I love that lady. Council agent, I just really think she's a jewel. So
Thank you.
I didn't realize that until Vicki told me. So
Yeah.
thank you.
She moved here to help me take care
Yeah,
of
she
my
told me.
husband.
We've had some good conversations. Fantastic. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, sir. All right, who shall I give these to?
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
We have no additional public comments, so administrative business. We'll start with the audit review. Or do we want to start with Senator Pittman? Okay. We'll start with Senator Pittman. And so you can sit there next to David, or you can come to whichever you would prefer.
We got an empty seat up here.
Oh, yeah. Senator Pittman, welcome, and I'll let you go ahead and start with some comments, and then we'll ask some questions.
Yeah, I'm glad, Chairperson. Thank you for inviting me, the whole commission. I appreciate your public service, obviously, to our county. Appreciate that. Just want to express that out there. I know it's tough sometimes. It is the end of the session. We're basically we've been in legislative session since January. We've done the turnaround, and we've sent bills out to the governor, and she started signing and vetoing some of the bills. We will meet next week on the 26th through the 29th and finish up some of the pieces of legislation that we didn't finish. We worked well into the night and into the morning hours last Thursday or Thursday before last till about 4 in the morning, and we finally called it quits because it was getting ridiculous. Honestly, nothing really good happens after dark, I believe, and especially after midnight. But I'm really happy that you've asked the legislators to come in and chat with you. I think it's really important to have open communication amongst our counties, our cities, and obviously the state. the state has a proclivity to put laws in place and sometimes neglects the local control and the voices of the locals, and I think that's a sad thing. Sometimes the body acts and doesn't take into account the financial impact of some of the things that they do or some of the unfunded mandates. So it's really important, in my opinion, that we all legislators show up and have these kind of discussions with you. I think we're going to have a couple of conversations about a couple of bills that are out there. I'll just say that the bills that are particularly, we have to focus on from a county perspective, there's a few of them. There's some good ones and some ones that are challenges. One of those, I guess the ones that affect the local budgets are the ones that we, obviously really affect you and how you can go about funding things. And those are things like the food tax that took away, proposal that took away the ability of the locals to also have that food tax revenue. So that was one of them. Obviously, there's the property tax bill that was proposed without thinking much about the local impact that was going to have. That was, I think, HB 20036. There's another one out there that had to do with taking away some other local revenue and mandating some more requirements on the revenue-neutral reporting requirements. There's another bill out there. I've got a list of them here if we want to go through the numbers, but another one that bans it stops you guys from banning things. Basically, it bans the banning of things like plastic goods and other consumables, and so that's out there as well. But with that said, there's some good bills that have come out of the legislature too. I'll just put one out there that I'm really proud of since I have the mic, and we're going to talk about your issues. But one of the important issues for me was a bill that I sponsored with a Republican and Democrat. We did a bipartisan bill that would give in-state tuition to military children that have been stationed in Kansas but have been forced to move because their parents have been deployed or moved on to another state. And they found that, like myself, Kansas was going to be their future home. And that's being signed by the governor today. Pretty excited about that. Small bill, right? But it's important for our local community to have a lot of military children that come here and move around and go through all that stress. Another bill that, also another small bill, but it's a Buffalo Soldier license plate bill. All the money from that license plate is going to come to our Richard Allen Cultural Center and also go to the New Fort Museum on history. So those are two great ones that I'm particularly proud of. Those small ones, but personal victories. But let's open it up. What kind of comments do you have?
Right, that's what we're here for. So thank you so much for coming. And I'll start with Commissioner Smith.
On these bills you're talking about, was there a bill attached about health clubs?
Yes, there was. No competition. So that's SB 252.
So no competition. So where will that end?
So that
I
hasn't
start
been,
with health clubs, but where will it end?
That hasn't been passed yet, but it's probably going to pass through in Senate. I think it's inside of Senate Bill 8 right now. But it started as SB 252, and the prior versions of this in other years were particularly noxious. The way it's referred to now is if there's an entity, let's call it a health club that's here, and if a local city comes in and puts in a health club in direct competition with that club that's already existing, then they can apply for relief with property tax relief.
It has to be a new business from this day forward. Our riverfront's not going to count.
Right. It has to be something that comes into play that's competing with something that's already existing at this point.
Okay, so.
But you're right. I mean, there are some gray areas in terms of what kind of businesses could actually apply for that. It's really looking at health clubs right now, but one could argue that if one put a library in place, that the bookstore could get a property tax relief. But there are very few kind of things like that.
I just don't want to open up the door, say you homeschool your children. Well, the school district doesn't pay taxes, so why should I pay it on my house if I'm homeschooling my kids in my house?
Yeah, that's one that no one's brought up before. But.
Well, I'm just, it could turn into that, and
sure.
Then, of course, we've got the Homestead Act bill on the veterans.
So just to talk about that?
Yeah.
So there was the proposition to give all disabled vets, 50%, 30%, different variations of tax exemption, property tax exemption, no matter the income or the property value.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody really whoever proposed the bills didn't really look at the financial impact to the locals at all. They looked at it from a state level only. And when it went to looking at the locals' impact, late stage in the session, obviously Leavenworth, Riley, Geary, Sedgwick, they were going to get hit hard by this particular thing. And as far as I saw, if we have $2 to $4 million of revenue lost at the county and we have to maintain that level of budget, that means everybody else's taxes are going to go up, and that's rough, right? We don't want to impose a new tax on people, and I don't think the veterans really wanted us to make them a burden on everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we did do in the Senate, after all this came to light, was we expanded the Homestead Act, which basically keeps the local governments whole from using the state general fund. We increased the limit up to $500,000 on the property, and I think we might have taken away the income level, and it's disabilities of 50% or higher can apply for this, and it freezes the tax rate.
But you still have an income level on the non-veterans, correct? Where it's $50,000.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
and a homestead could be up to 160 acres. A house in 160 acres.
I don't know about the acreage. I know it could only be 500,000 in terms of property tax value.
And your valuation. Okay.
I'm not sure if there was a limit on the
and then
acreage.
Back then to comparable sales on how we figure our appraisals. That could kind of upset our appraisals too. If somebody's going to purchase a property that they don't have to pay property tax on, they can stand tall and pay a little more for that property. Potentially, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Which I don't agree with comparable sales, anyways. I was hoping that would get changed in the legislature.
There was some discussions on that, but they didn't move forward. There was quite a bit of discussion in tax committees about how they were opening. There were some arguments that the appraisers were looking a little too far away from some of the properties that they were evaluating against.
Mm-hmm. Well, our county's unique. It's definitely unique. We have so much tax-exempt property. And the answer to it's not taking more people off the tax rolls. It's putting more people on the tax rolls. That's quite a few houses we've got to put on the tax rolls, to make up the losses in what we get.
I will say the Homestead Act should keep you completely whole, though.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well,
but local ad valorem would have helped also.
Agree. I had my bill out there as Senate Bill 196, which would have given you the percent back to the locals.
And that didn't go anywhere?
No, the chair had said that she might have a hearing on it. She kind of wanted to get rid of the whole statute. Mm-hmm. It was put back in place into the House budget at a $56 million or something level, and it was in the last few negotiations on the budget between the House and the Senate. It was remaining there for quite some time, but then it finally went away.
$56 million for the whole state?
Yeah.
To give out? That wouldn't go very far.
No. I think the actual amount that's supposed to be there is $117 million for the whole state.
okay, and am I assuming too much to think that probably with the homestead that will be the funds that were supposed to go to all of the counties, through the local ad valorem relief, will be used instead to fund the...
Effectively, right?
I think that I'm effectively correct. So there's no hope for other residents of Leavenworth County to get relief via that fund that was supposed to come to us to begin with. It's just kind of like a shift. So
Yeah.
we're still, so the state is still going to get credit for and pat themselves on the back for doing something that really negatively impacts what was supposed to have already been happening through the counties, through the relief tax, funds.
Sure.
And so what we are basically being told is that don't hold your breath, you will never get that.
From the current temperature of the legislature, I'd say it's 50-50 whether people are supportive of it. Locally, I think that's the ratios. Maybe I'm the only one.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just asking because
I
I
hear what you're
think
saying,
that,
yeah.
I just think that I just want people to understand that the local ad valorem tax relief was supposed to be coming to us
Last 20 years.
for the past 20 years, but it's been held by the state of Kansas to kind of help balance their budget, where they're asking us to make sure that we keep ours in check. They have been able to benefit off of what did not come back to us and will continue to do so.
And
I'm just,
the state statute, it's billed as a property tax relief,
right.
and it's been in place since 1965. So,
Well, it was just, unfortunately, you're
it's
the only
money
one.
that's collected from here.
Right. You're the only one of our representatives that were willing to come and speak with us last week or today or at another date if we were willing to arrange. So I thank you for that.
Sure.
And I'm not trying to pick on you,
No,
Senator. I'm just asking a question.
It's been a tough question because the legislature, it was in the governor's budget originally.
Right.
It's basically been hanging out there. I'd encourage you to continue to advocate through both the county of, the Association of Counties, but individually it makes a difference too. Earlier, the stronger the better is all I can say.
One thing on that too, if I could, Madam Chair. Jeff, I really appreciate you coming out. I'll be at the next week, I'll be at the County Commissioners Annual Conference, and it was surprising last year when Commissioner Steve and I were out there, when we brought this up, that how many new county commissioners were not aware of what exactly. Well, being an old city manager from many moons ago, I know exactly when this started and when the thing. And I think you're absolutely right. First, I'm glad you supported that because we need that. And the other thing is, I know these commissioners up there, we're not going to let it go away. So you're preaching to the right people because we're going to continue trying it because we just can't have that occur, and then we try to balance our budget. And I have to look at the citizens out here and say, well, there's another mandate that we can't do, or we're not getting the funding back that is by law we should be getting back. But it's okay, since they're in Topeka, they're allowed to break the law. So I had a real tough time with that, but I appreciate what you try to do for us.
And it's just not that. Over the years of everything that they've shifted back to the county, the business machinery tax.
Remember that one too?
Yeah, like I said, we were all in government when all these things have taken place, and it's just we're never getting nothing back.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that business machinery thing. I think it hits northeast Kansas unfairly, where the rest of the state gets agricultural equipment sales tax free. You see where the dominant powers in the legislature put that in place, but you start looking at some of the other pieces. We have industry over here. We're the growth area of the state, in my opinion. And unless we get special incentives, it's different. We don't give the same incentives to some of the businesses that have those kind of machinery needs and other things. But not that you want us to give exemptions.
Well, percentage-wise,
Yeah,
these 100% ones are tough.
Yeah.
We're dealing with a dog food plant now in Tonganoxie that needs a road upgrade in front of it,
Right.
with no tax dollars collected from this. So it's going to be interesting to see how that turns out.
Yeah. There was a bill on property tax. I just want to make sure there's a proposal out there. I had it as SCR 1604, and it's morphed into SCR 1611, and it did pass the Senate. And we have property tax code in the Constitution, as you guys know. It has the rates percentage of how much how the assessment is supposed to work. And it has the rates at which different types of property are assessed at and taxed at. And then those assessment levels are then what the mill levies are applied to, as you guys know. This proposition would put on the next November the proposition changes in the Constitution that only allow a 4% rise in assessed values of properties. Okay? And what that would do, I'm an advocate for it. I want to drop it out there, so maybe you're not. So it's good to have the discussion either now or later. But I want to make sure we're talking about it. The idea is that the assessments are going to be what the assessments are, right? They can't change how the assessors, no matter how much you argue with them about your assessed value, they're really trying to do their job, which is get it as close to real market value as it is supposed to be. So their hands are tied. They might bend a little bit here and there, but they can't do anything. The value of properties do increase over time, especially here in our county. It's one of the top counties in terms of how our values are going up. Great for an investment. It's bad for when you're seeing your property tax bill come in. And so just like the farmers have solidity in terms of their farm value, they're assessed at like an 8-year moving average over eight averages of.
Right.
So it smooths it out.
8 year.
They can predict what they're going to have. When I go out and talk to my constituents, as you talk to your constituents, property taxes are top on their mind. And this would allow us to have a mechanism in the law that would just slow the rate in terms of those double-digit increases, and so it would catch up to eventually the real value of the property, over a set number of years. But our residents wouldn't have these big double-digit increases. That, through no fault of theirs, no fault of yours, their value of their property is just increasing because of market forces. We know that we can, play with the mill levies, but that's difficult to do year over year to kind of keep a steady rate because there's so many different kind of taxing entities that can tap in, and so that this would make it steadier. It would make your jobs easier, I believe, and I think a 4% increase rise is adequate for funding government. And there can be exceptions about when property changes hands or disasters strike and things like that. So I just want to lay that out there that SCR 1611 is an attempt at putting to the people some type of property tax relief that goes beyond, what you're.
And that could go on the ballot this year, or has it got to be 2024?
It's proposed to go in 2024.
Okay.
There's no logic to why.
So,
election year, that's
election
the
year,
logic.
okay, that's the logic, yeah. Okay, so then if it passes, take a couple years to reinvent the wheel.
What do you mean?
On the property tax? Well, you think it just draw across the line, it could go into effect in for the 2025.
2025. Now, there's an idea about how far back. I mean, it is backward looking, I think, in terms of your
No, not retroactive.
No, it's
not retroactive from the time the state quit paying local ad valorem tax.
No.
Okay. But
No, we appreciate the work that you've done on that.
no,
We sincerely do.
absolutely. Just a dollar amount on the local ad valorem, since we at about 40 million, 30
for Leavenworth
for
County.
Leavenworth County.
What we've lost over the years.
About
I think
just a
if you look-
ballpark.
Well, I think if you look at all of the adjustments through the business machinery exemption and the mortgage
filing
registration
fee,
and the local ad valorem, I think it's probably pushing 55 to 60 million by this time.
60
I think
million.
it was. No.
No, since
that
we lost it.
overall. No, it would be, I think, probably about 2.5 mils a year.
A year.
Yeah.
That'd fix all of our bridge problems. We wouldn't have any bridge problems right now.
Jeff, do you have?
A couple things. I was going to expand on what Commissioner Smith said about Leavenworth County being unique. We're 35%, $2.8 billion of our valuation is exempt from taxes. And I know we've had a lot of conversations about this, and I've been back and forth to Topeka, the last couple of weeks. And when the state handed out to all the counties the property tax system, saying this is what every county will use to pay their bills with, property tax. When they did that, it doomed Leavenworth County taxpayers to pay high taxes because the 65% of everybody that is paying taxes have to pick up the 35% that's exempt. I don't know really what the answer is because 90% of the state doesn't have this problem. So this is something that's been evident that I've seen in Topeka the last couple of weeks is most of the state doesn't even know what I'm talking about. So I don't know how to fix replacing the property tax system other than like House Bill 79 was going to do, was going to allow counties to put it on a voting ballot to ask the local counties, each county, do you want to add a 1% income tax? And that would fix Leavenworth County's problem, because we're like, I think, 5th from the top of income earners, but 7th from the bottom for our actual county mill levy, because we've tried to offset high taxes on the backs of the county's budget for 30 years, and it's not working because that's not the problem. Another thing that's not a problem is, just like you touched on, the CAMA system, the appraisal system the appraiser came out with in 1990 is working. Half the legislators that we have now think that the CAMA system itself, the appraisal system, is the problem. That's not what the problem is. It's actually working very well. It's keeping everybody's market value current instead of letting it lag behind. The 3 or 4 or 5% or wherever it's at now cap rate for the valuation going up, I think it's a good idea, but it's not actually fixing the problem. But I don't think it's going to hurt anything. I think it'll help a lot. I think it's a good idea. But the main problem still has to be addressed. Leavenworth County is doomed to pay higher taxes for the people that are paying taxes because of all the exemption. If we don't get something like Senate Bill 79, or the LAVTR's goal was to shift some of the weight off property tax onto sales tax, if we don't get something like that, like the LAVTR or House Bill 79, I don't know what's going to happen as far as people's taxes just keep going up, because we've got to make up that shortfall someplace, and it's on the backs of the people that are still paying taxes. The biggest concern about the Veterans Bill, when it first came out, we were very concerned about it because it wasn't including the homestead model in there. It was just going to say, hey, they didn't pay the taxes to the county, disabled veterans. So we're not against veterans whatsoever. We love our veterans. We want to do everything we can for veterans, but not at the cost of the other 23,000 taxpayers' taxes going up drastically. So then they changed the model to use the homestead, where the state would reimburse the individual directly instead of them not paying the county's taxes. So we were all for it again. But we heard lately they were trying to add, is it Senate Bill 252, is the Genesis bill, we call it, into the Veterans Bill. Is that still the case?
Yes.
So that we're back to another problem, because the Genesis bill starts with health clubs, but I think we all know that's just opening Pandora's box. And if you get all the way down to rental property, because Michael's Housing on Fort Leavenworth now rents to the public. The Veterans Administration remodeled all his domiciliaries, they rent to the public. So that's direct competition to rental property in Leavenworth County. And Leavenworth City, I know, is 55% rental property. So you're going to exempt 55% of the homes in Leavenworth City? That's back to another big problem. So I don't know what the answer is. Like I said, the biggest problem is 90% of the counties don't have the same problem we do. So when you guys are in Topeka passing legislation, you're passing for the entire state. That's where we always get the short end of the stick, is the majority of the state isn't concerned with what the problems are in Leavenworth County. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you don't pull your hair out, because me going back and forth just a couple times the last couple weeks, there's no way I could.
It can be frustrating for sure. I mean, what we need to have is good relationships with other counties. We got to build up alliances in the Senate and in the House. We have to advocate, and we often do a lot of trade-offs. You know, there's other areas where we are in the middle. I'm going to call this one, we're on the outside of this particular issue. You know, we have such a low tax base for property taxes, but other areas, we're in the middle of a rural versus urban. We're right in the middle. And when we do something to help the rurals, somehow Leavenworth gets caught out. So when we go and help the urbans, we somehow lose out there too. So it's a tough position for us. We've got to link in with the Northeast Kansas delegations and really advocate for that. There was a bill, Senate Bill 34. This is something to keep on your radar for our developers, our housing developers out there. It's a housing initiative. We put in place some housing incentives last year for affordable housing. Basically, units that are around 1,600 square feet. A developer can come in, build up to 50 units in certain size towns. So we were excluded as a county from that bill, and we put tax credits in to help incentivize the developers to go out and do these lower end, more affordable housing units. This year, we've opened it up, so now the cities inside of Leavenworth County can do it, and we made an amendment in committee. I made an amendment to increase the level up to the counties so that we could actually be included in that bill from a county level too. So that's something to be aware of, that we were about to get cut out of that. I was like, come on now. I know you don't want to have this going out across all of Johnson County, but still, we need to have this for our Leavenworth County, because we need affordable housing here. We need our workers. We're growing.
Absolutely.
We've got Panasonic. We've got other entities we're trying to bring in. We need to have that affordable housing. But your point's well taken, that we often have unique things here that other counties don't.
And I had one more thing that's not unique to Leavenworth County. I was going to find out has there been much conversation about state unfunded mandates? So the county's budget, a lot of people don't know this, is about 30% state unfunded mandates, which means we couldn't cut those figures, those budget items, if we wanted to.
Sure.
Missouri passed a Hancock Amendment years ago that said no more state unfunded mandates. And what basically a state unfunded mandate is, the state comes in and says, the county, you will have this service, or you will have this department, or you will have this asset.
Sure.
But the state's not going to pay for it. You have to pay for it with local tax money from your county taxpayers. But you have to do it. Is there any conversation about stopping adding more state unfunded mandates from this point forward, or doing anything about the ones we already have? Or
Being completely transparent, no.
Because that does affect every county.
Talk about it. People use it as a rhetorical device when it's convenient, but it's not necessarily something that anybody's pushed, including myself, to say, hey, we're going to stop this altogether.
Okay, and that's why I was asking, because when I go to Topeka, nobody even knows what I'm talking about. So.
Oh, people who've been around, they understand what an unfunded mandate really is, and the state has done it a number of times, even while I've been there. It comes up in the discussions, but there's not been a consistent effort to say, hey, this has got to stop across the board, a statute that makes it so that we can do that. We can't do that. Something that we can push, though. Certainly, obviously the counties and cities they have good lobbying. They have a lot of contact. We could certainly push for something like that.
Okay. We had a conversation about that at the last Kansas Association of Counties. There's a small group that was going to try to reach out and get some kind of a bill authored or created anyway. I didn't know if you had any more conversation about it.
Just to layer on top of that, exemption versus, when we do exemptions, it affects everybody, and that includes our schools, too. I just want to lay that out. When we cut away pieces of property and people's individual properties from the tax rolls, that means our schools are going to drop in terms of how much funding comes in from the 20 mills that we have as a state level.
Right.
Schools, township, county.
Mark, did you have something?
Yeah, if I could. The unfunded mandate portion of it, that needs to be a constitutional amendment, because as we've seen, when it's inconvenient at the state level to follow certain rules, they just set them aside, and like the local ad valorem tax reduction. They just set them aside and don't follow them if it's not a constitutional. So that's what they did on the Missouri side, and I don't give Missouri credit for a lot, but no unfunded mandates is good. The rest of the Hancock Amendment was bad, so we'll just go with that. And I just wanted to reiterate something that actually Senator Pittman said, and then a couple of the commissioners, and that is when you provide tax relief to a group, that's not tax relief, and Commissioner Doug Smith has been hitting on this for years. It's a tax shift. So what we were opposed to taking a hit in local tax revenue, because we knew that meant we had to shift it to the other 23,000 parcels that were paying taxes. That's why we're opposed to it. Not that it wasn't, I guess, a good thing for that group of people, but that it impacts all the other people negatively. So the state levies a 1.5 mils on property tax. That's it. So when they talk about giving up property taxes, they're only talking about 1.5 mils. The county has 36 mils if you're in the city. If you're outside the city, it's add another 8 mills for the local roads. Then you got school districts and everything else. So we appreciate that you're trying to provide tax relief. We don't appreciate that it comes on our backs, and then that we have to pass that on to our local citizens, and then we get beat up for it because we don't support veterans somehow, is what some of the people say. We support the veterans. We support all of our people. We support people with disabilities, but we support all of the people with disabilities, and we didn't want to see a negative impact on everybody else. That was the thing. This legislation doesn't come about because you guys are bad people. It comes about because you're good people, and you're trying to find a way to help other people. But sometimes I think it's hard for the state representatives to understand the true impact on local communities. The other thing that the Hancock Amendment requires is that before you pass legislation, you have to get the local impact, the financial impact to locals before you can adopt the legislation. That's how they calculate that's how they calculate the rest of it, that say you can't have an unfunded mandate. So they have a bill like the veterans bill. They send it to locals and say, would this impact you? And we say, yes, we think it'd be something along here. So then when they go to adopt that legislation, they have to find out a way to cover it at the state level instead of the local level. So, but appreciate what you do, appreciate what all of our representatives do. But we do get a little fired up when you start taking away our money. And when we have promises that you'll give us money down the road, those don't really hold water because of the history of the local ad valorem tax relief, the business machinery exemption, and so on and so forth. So.
And when Mark says our money, that's something that always keeps coming up in almost every conversation I have with taxpayers. It's not the county's money, it's the taxpayers' money. So when we say the county, we mean the taxpayers. So when you would pass a bill like this, it's the taxpayers' money that we're talking about, that we're worried about, that we're concerned about. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. It's not like the county is taking the money and going and having a party with it. We're just converting that to services and assets for the taxpayers.
The buck stops here. We don't have any place else to get it from.
Exactly.
So, is there any talk about replacing property tax with some other kind of tax to fund governments? Like
So House Bill 79.
tax or sales tax, or
There is
not 100% replacement, but
well, if you think
something
about
to
it,
help.
it's I mean, property taxes for the locals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Commissioner Culberson was saying, there is a Senate Bill 79 which would put give you the ability to have a revenue tax instead of the property tax. Some people don't like that. Some people understand it. Here locally from a county government, you can see the benefits where we have a lot of people coming into the county from out of state, from around the area, that could help fund the roads that they use every day for their jobs. Same thing in Wyandotte County. They have a lot of people that come in and then leave. That's another part of my district. So one could see where that could help them and lower the amount of property taxes on everybody by doing that. That's a possibility. But, you know, there's a lot of ideas, but I wouldn't say there's some super creative idea that's way out of the norm. That's being discussed right now to replace all property taxes.
Do you think Leavenworth County, where are we at on the average of businesses versus residential to help fund things? Are we lacking on the business side?
I'd have to ask you. I think I
think we are.
He knows the answer.
Well,
no, I think the businesses, we will continue to draw businesses here, and that's going to help relieve the burden on every other taxpayer when we get more commercial and industry up here.
But I think scale's not balanced there.
I agree with you.
We depend way too much on residential.
I think the affordable housing thing, that's something that's really been missed in this area. People get scared when you say affordable housing. That's not what some folks think it is. Basically, you know, when I was out in Lansing, we brought affordable housing in because we got the tax credits and everything else like that. And this is where your firefighters live, your police officers, your nurses, and it's income based. So you could get that. So that's what we're seeing a lot of problems around here because you're in one category or the other. You can afford the $800,000 home, or you have to rent, and the rent's jumped up so much because of everything. I've seen rent go up from $900 to $1,300 all across the board, and people just can't afford that. But Jeff, I appreciate appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate you coming out here today.
Sure.
And I know that we promised we would have you
Yeah,
out here,
we're
so.
taking too much of his time now.
No. I appreciate you guys. Like I said, I can come back in after the session's over here in about a month and a half, and we can do another recap and talk about some
That'd be
strategies
great.
for next year.
Would
Keep
very
in
much
mind, there's
appreciate
still
it.
money out there. There's some infrastructure money that's going to be available for you guys to bid on with the cities and the county. So we just want to align on anything we need to do with the Department of Transportation, anything the state representatives and senators, we should be leveraged to help you in your county applications into that process. It could get a little convoluted because of things that we just put in place, the process itself. So we might need some folks escorting those requests through the process.
Yeah.
But be aware that that's going to be out there, right?
We have
We
a need.
appreciate it very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Senator.
you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks
Senator.
for having me. I'm
Thanks,
going to
Jeff.
step out now, okay?
Yes,
All right.
thank
So
you very
thanks for
much.
over there.
All right.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks.
Okay, now we'll move
Now
to
we're
your.
ready.
Wow, my topic is so light now. I can't imagine. It's good people like that we need, though, but I don't know how they don't get disheartened and give up when they're in there fighting that battle. It's crazy. All right, so the audit, I will say there were 0 adjustments, so the numbers you're seeing today are the same numbers Janet and her team would have presented to you at the end of the year. As you notice on the date, we were finished and complete by March 30th. We get here, everything's ready to go, and we knock it out. So this is our largest county that we do, and it's probably the most organized, and we get it done as quickly as any county that we do. The letter that's inside the packet is the required governance letter. I like to point out always that the second paragraph says the responsibility for this financial statement is yours. It's Janet, administration, and yours. Our job is to audit it. So the numbers that are here, although we put it in the nice binder and we make it all look fancy, these all come from you. And Janet reviews this in detail after we've finished. She reviews the draft to make sure that everything's correct. So I like to point that out. If there had been adjustments, they would be identified in this letter. But second page down about halfway, you'll see that there were no uncorrected or corrected misstatements. You might wonder, why would there be an uncorrected misstatement? Well, if we found something small that wasn't material and management said, we're not going to fix that, we could pass. But we had nothing like that either. So no adjustments. The audit itself, if you will just flip to the actual financial statement, which is pages 4 and 5. As I said, Leavenworth is our largest county. You have the most funds, and you have a lot going on. So you have 2 pages for your statement 1. This is the financial statement of the county. So down the left-hand side, you'll see all the funds that the county operates. And I always like to say there's a separate set of books for every one of those funds. So if anybody thinks government employees don't work hard, they're wrong. Because this is complicated stuff. As we go down, you'll see each fund starts with the beginning cash from the prior year. We show your receipts and expenditures by fund, and then your ending unencumbered cash that's available for moving to the next year. We do add back the outstanding encumbrances and accounts payable so that we can tie to your reconciled bank balance at the end of the year. So if you'll turn to page 5, about 2/3 of the way down, it says total county. You can see the total county started with $41,281,000. You took in $80,800,000. You expended $83,004,000, leaving you with unencumbered of $38,800,000. So that is the county. Now down below are the related municipal entities, which are your sewer districts that also get included in your report. So then you get your grand totals at the very bottom for the total reporting entity. If you'll notice, there were no funds that were negative cash. There are exceptions when you can have negative cash, for example, in a grant fund or any kind of reimbursement, but there were no funds with negative cash. If you turn to page 6, you'll see where the money is held for the county. You go down the list, a lot of it's in checking and treasury bills on page 6, and then there's about $1.5 million sitting at the Kansas Municipal Investment Pool. So you see that $110 million, which is a bigger number than what you saw on the previous page. But that's because almost $71 million of the money that's on deposit belongs to others. So that belongs to schools, cities, townships that are within your district. And if you'll flip back, and I'll just show you where that $70 million comes from. If you flip back to page 50, and it actually starts on page 49, there's your listing of what makes up that $70 million that we back out. The bulk of it is ad valorem, current ad valorem tax sitting there to be distributed in January. As you know, your biggest distribution happens in January. And then down toward the bottom, you have some other outside funds. The district court has money, the law library, and then the sheriff's department has several accounts. And so those are outside the purview of the county. Any questions on the financial statement? The next several pages are the notes, which I will not read to you. If you will flip to page 11, this is your note regarding your debt for the county. So it shows you all of your GO bonds that are outstanding, all of your revolving loans through KDHE, and then you have a financing lease through the Motorola Solutions Credit Company. So that gives you your beginning balance, interest paid, principal paid, ending balance of your debt. And then on the following page, page 12 gives you the maturities of that debt in increments of 1 year for the first 5 and then 5-year increments thereafter. And of course it changes every year because every year you pay off something and you get more debt. All right, then we're going to flip really quickly to page 16. Page 16 is where we just demonstrate and show the compliance of the county with your budget. A lot of talk about budget this morning and how you have a budget you have to stick to, although the state doesn't have to and the federal doesn't have to and nobody else has to follow the rules, but you do follow the rules.
I've noticed that.
So when you go through this page, you'll see all the numbers on the right-hand side are in brackets. That means you were under budget in all your funds. So no violations of any kind, including budget violations. Then we're going to look at one fund, and then I won't go through each other fund. The general fund starts on page 17. It's your largest fund, and this demonstrates the revenue, your actual versus budget that came in. The revenues are on 17, and the top of 17 are your receipts. So you can see you budgeted $28.3 million, and you brought in $28.8. And then you'll start your different categories going down for the departments in the general fund. I always like to pick on commissioners, and you're under budget, which is great. Any department or line item within a fund can be over budget as long as the bottom line for that fund is not. So commissioners did a great job, and if you look down through, most of these departments are under budget. And if they're not, Janet knows the reason why. Probably specifically.
I do.
She's on it. So, all right, so page 20 then is the last page of the general fund. So there you can see at the bottom that you ended the year with general fund cash of $5.6 million. Like I said, all the next pages are all the other funds, which we won't go through. But if you will skip to the back of the report, back to page 55, again, the county was required to have a single audit due to the ARPA funds that came through, the COVID relief funds. So we did have to do a single audit, and obviously the program we tested was the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds, the second line on page 55 of $7.8 million. We worked with Mark, we worked with Janet, we worked with Debbie to go through and test the requirements on that money and whether the county followed that money, including reporting. Did you spend it on things that were allowed? Did you follow the guidance that was provided? So that was the program that we tested. And then if you look on page 57, this is our schedule of findings and question costs. There were none. And I also like to point out about 2/3 of the way down where it says auditee qualified as a low-risk auditee. You can never be a low-risk auditee because you report under the KMAG model, and that by definition is not considered low-risk auditee. That simply means we are required to test 40% of your total federal expenditures versus 20% if you were a low-risk. Any questions? Is that enough detail?
That's plenty.
You can always reach out with questions.
Looks pretty sound. Yeah.
Yeah, great job. We love working with your county. So.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
I'm just
I don't. Mark, thanks for all you do.
thankful for everything the staff does
Janet
to do
and
this,
Mark
because
and all of our staff and
I'd
and
hate
you
to have
for-
to pay that money back because it wasn't used on allowable expenses. So,
All right, well, thank you all.
Thank you.
April, thank you.
Thank you.
And April, I enjoyed visiting with you this past
Yeah,
audit time.
you too. Take care.
Thank you. Okay. Any other administrative business that anybody has for us? Mark?
Just a reminder, I know I sent the email and we've received invites, but May 24th at 5:30 is our joint meeting with Tonganoxie.
May 24th.
May 24th at 5:30. I'm sorry,
That's
Baser.
Baser. That's Baser.
Yep, Baser.
May 1st.
May 1st is Tonganoxie.
Jeff, anything?
No, this audit reminds me of a question I was going to ask Jeff about. I wish we could separate out the schools and the townships from the counties.
Make you write 2 separate checks.
Responsibility.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Basically, education, where it's coming from.
Doug, do you have anything on the administrative side?
I don't.
Okay, then we will move on.
Appreciate the clerk's office and their staff and
Yes.
everybody that's on this audit.
Involved, yeah.
This is a good audit, good,
Yeah.
clean audit.
Good job. All right, well, then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Anything that need to be pulled from the consent agenda today?
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion and second. We'll begin voting with Commissioner Culberson.
Aye.
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 Okay. Clear the consent agenda. All right, formal board action. We need to consider a motion to approve Resolution 2023-6 regarding the formation of Fire District Number 2. David?
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, once again before you is the issue of forming a second fire district in the county. That district to be referred to as Fire District Number 2. It would consist of the townships of Sherman and Reno and the city of Linwood. This action before you today is a result of quite a bit of work over several years from the citizens of Reno, Sherman Township, and the city of Linwood to provide better fire protection for those citizens. There are 2 components to this I'd like to address today. The first is the resolution. The resolution starts the process to formally form a fire district. It will require a public hearing. We tentatively have scheduled that for May 10th. At that time, you will hear public comment. Any citizen can provide you input as to any proposed alteration of the fire district boundaries or the formation of the fire district itself. Subsequent to May 10th, May 17th, should you continue to support the formation of the fire district, the step after the finalization of the adoption of the resolution creating the fire district on the 17th would be the entry into an interlocal agreement. That interlocal agreement would be between the county, city of Linwood, and the townships of Reno and Sherman. The terms of that interlocal are presented to you. And I'd like to thank Mr. Eric Westlander from the city of Lawrence, who's the legal counsel for the proposed fire district, and Misty Brown for going through that interlocal agreement, fine-tuning it, and I think it's one that will be beneficial to the parties. The goal of that interlocal agreement is to set up the framework for the governance of the fire district and to grant full autonomy for the operation of that fire district to the townships and the city of Linwood. In essence, you're assigning all of your legal authorities over to the governing body of the township of Fire District Number 2 as composed between the townships and the city. And I think they've proposed a workable relationship and one that is hoped to continue for the duration of the fire district. That being said, you have a representative here to address things, but the culmination of all of this is to have a fire district formed in the southern part of the county that will operate to provide, we're hopeful, enhanced fire protection services to those citizens.
I see a couple of adjustments, and I'm fine with that. I'm glad y'all got together and worked some of those things out.
Know more about fire districts than I wanted to know.
Hey, let me tell you, I lived through Fire District 1. Let me tell you, yeah, me too.
Me too.
If there's no question, I'll make a motion to approve resolutions 2023-6 regarding the formation. I'm sorry.
May I make one just brief comment? And that is one thing I realized. The version I sent to Janet of the resolution, and I haven't seen the latest and greatest, suggests publishing an interlocal under item 4 as a provided for in attached Exhibit A. To save costs on printing, there's no requirement that the actual interlocal be published. I just wanted to call that out because I noticed it at the last minute.
And I thought maybe if you wanted to give a caveat to that, make it available through other means or something like that. I didn't want you all to have a bigger printing bill than you needed on this.
And well noted, the purpose of publishing that interlocal agreement is to provide information to the public so they can make informed comments to you on the 17th of May. And the publication costs are not a substantial barrier.
That was my only concern. I apologize for interrupting.
That's all right. I'm not sure how I'm going to vote now after you did that. Again, motion to approve Resolution 2023-6 regarding the formation of Fire District Number 2.
Motion to have a second?
I'll second it.
A motion and a second. Begin voting with Commissioner Culberson.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
We'll get it signed.
Congratulations,
And
folks.
thank the township for all their hard work
Yep,
and
yeah.
to getting this done. Now, this will be able to be a tax set up for 2024, correct?
Yes, Commissioners.
We will meet the deadlines.
Provided that the townships and the city, the fire district presents a budget to the county clerk on or before July 1, they will have taxing authority for fiscal year 2024. I would like to note that part of the interlocal agreement, the townships and the cities have voluntarily limited the tax levy for the fire district below the statutory limitation. So I think they're acting very responsibly with respect to their fiscal responsibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I noticed that, Dave. You're right. You're right.
I just appreciate they have a vision and they're being proactive on this growth in southern Leavenworth County that they'll be able to meet the demand. And it's amazing that I'm just appreciate two township boards coming together and doing this and also the city of Linwood.
Yes.
I think this is going to be a great thing. I think it's going to be efficient. It's going to save taxpayers money in the long run.
Okay.
I agree.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you very much. Best of luck. Now we need to consider a motion to approve the declaration of property recorded in book.
Commissioners,
Did you do the roll call vote on that?
I
Yeah,
think
Oh.
motion second.
you need
I
to
thought we
vote on
did.
the resolution.
Oh, I thought we did.
I
Sorry.
thought we did.
We did.
Did you do the roll call?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah,
we
we
did.
did. We
It was
That's why-
fast.
It was
That's
fast,
why it
Mark.
was-
Jeff started, and I did,
Well,
yeah.
actually, shouldn't have had the discussion afterwards. You should have did it during. That's all right. We're official.
We're on top of it.
Okay, we need to consider a motion to approve the declaration of property recorded in Book 513, page 1,873 as surplus, as presented.
Commissioners, brought this issue to Mr. Van Paris. We have property that was acquired through fee simple title for right-of-way acquisition, so we actually own the property. It is a 10-foot strip. That property is currently going through a land division process, and so the original road right-of-way was taken as easement, and then we have our additional 10-foot of right-of-way and then the property. So what we've created is a gap in ownership between the actual section line and the edge of the right-of-way line. And so what we would like to do is declare this property surplus. We would then quit claim deed this property to the landowner who is going through a land division process, and then require in some sort of agreement ahead of time that they then sign an easement back over to the county. So we need this right-of-way. Our ditch is located within this right-of-way. However, we do not want to own this section of right-of-way on Lecompton Road. So we would just basically be transferring from simple title ownership to easement rights that would have the same maintenance responsibilities.
Formality.
Yeah.
Yep, formality.
Ready for a motion?
I'm ready for a motion. Thank you, Bill.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the declaration of property recorded in Book 513, page 1873 as surplus as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Begin voting with Commissioner Culberson.
Aye.
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 Okay. Motion carries. Presentations and discussion items. Okay.
Here we go.
Rural transportation.
Let's see, Regional Transportation Plan presentation. Come on up. Thank you.
Come on down.
I don't know if commissioners would like the lights or if this is showing up on your computer.
It's on our screen.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Morning.
I think this is a presentation I think a few of you have seen at different council meetings already, so it shouldn't be a surprise to you. My name is Jeff McCare with Kimley Horn, and to give you a bit of a project update on where we stand today. I want to take you quickly through a reminder of the approach we're taking on this project and the idea of taking what was more than 20 years of plans for the region for transportation improvements and starting to evaluate them, brush them off, and start to figure out how we can prioritize those. The goal of this really comes down to focusing collectively as a region, so that when you start to look at different funding opportunities that are out there that aren't county funds, be it regional funds through the Mid-America Regional Council, state funds through KDOT, or federal competitive grants, that you can really work in concert with you and the local communities here to advocate for specific projects and priorities. Doing so dramatically increases your chance of winning some of those competitive grants. And what we've told all the city councils as we've met with them here earlier this month, what we'll tell you again today, historically, the cities and the county here in Leavenworth have not done a good job of that. Some of your neighboring communities and counties have done a much better job advocating with one voice.
Yes.
And have found a much better success. Yes.
Yes.
We'll recap some of the engagement that we went through last fall through this process. Between stakeholder meetings, the public meetings, online meetings. And we'll show you a consolidated list of projects, taking those 20 years worth of studies that have been done and focusing that down. Some of those projects overlap with each other and how we focus those down to specific projects. Then we're going to go through how we look at evaluating and prioritizing projects, different ways to do with it. The evaluation of the projects is something that is calculable. It is something that you can go through and the metrics are defined. The prioritization is where your desires and needs and wants come into play. What do you rank as more important, be it safety over, say, economic development? That's where you start to see those factors come to play. We'll also show and talk a little bit about what some of the people who offer these grants, what they value. Because while your priorities are important, what the federal government, what KDOT, what Mid-America Regional Council says is important to them, as they're the ones with the money, that's something to keep in mind as well as we look through that. We'll show you some initial testing of the tool and some different outcomes, how you could have different prioritizations, and what that could mean to the projects as they go forward. Our approach to this project, really we started on two different categories. On one side, we looked at the criteria development. How would we look at evaluating projects? And we really looked again at federal criteria, Mid-America Regional criteria, KDOT criteria, and then what about locals? What are your inputs and thoughts on those criteria? At the same time, we went through the projects and started to scrub those and really look at the previous studies that were done, update the cost, find out if there are other projects that are out there that we hadn't seen, so that we could take those into account. Today we're here. We're through those processes initially to really take a look at what those outcomes were and to gather input. We've done that with the 4 large cities here in Leavenworth County. We want to hear from you today. And that's the opportunity for us to go back and revisit issues if we need to before we come up with that draft plan and publish that. The focal point really as we look at this and that next timeline comes out is this fall when KDOT will do their next round of local consult. So really we want to get through this process this summer.
Okay.
We held a series of stakeholder meetings in late October, early November last year with different industries, with the port authorities, school districts, with industries, with community developers, with community leaders, including leaders outside of Leavenworth County. We've reached out to neighboring entities as well to gather their input. Elected officials as well as KCATA. So a lot of feedback. We had more than 40 participants in those meetings. And we heard some common themes come out as we talked with them. One, there was certainly a desire to see increased connections between communities. How can you go from Tonganoxie to Leavenworth? Making sure that we keep those intra-county travel trips, and how we can make that a priority. Certainly the importance of K7 and what that means to a lot of the communities on the east part of the county. We had a lot of support for bicycle accommodations, and I do want to caveat that is while there's a lot of support for bicycle accommodations, it's not by taking away lanes of travel or doing anything extreme. It's just acknowledging that we have bicyclists out there and how can we accommodate them. Some of our developers indicated that really helps them as they're recruiting businesses and residents to know that there are trails or bicycle accommodations in the area. There's a balance of quality of life with a rural environment. Recognize while we've got a lot of cities, there's also a lot of rural natures to the county that a lot of people want to maintain. We heard from MoDOT that there was no current plans for the 152 to be extended. What some of the communities, Parkville as an example, showed some interest in that. There was desire for enhanced regional access east to 152 Highway in Missouri as well as at KCI, but also south to DeSoto and Panasonic. The news of the Panasonic battery plant broke this fall. As we're in this process, it was certainly at the front of a lot of people's minds. We asked the stakeholders to prioritize in several different categories. What do they find as important? If we're looking to evaluate jobs, what are the things that they want us to take into consideration? Economic impact, equity or access to jobs, the ability to get our residents in Leavenworth County to employment centers, and congestion, those rank to those top priorities. We had a public meeting as well in early November, too, one in Lansing, the other in Basehor, to gather different inputs. Some of those same themes came across. Access to Panasonic and DeSoto. Several spot locations were identified for safety improvements. There's a curve here. There's a section of road without a shoulder that there were concerns on, so we could hear from that. That issue about bicycle routes came forward. And there was a desire for visibility in the process. The public wanted to be sure that it just wasn't the loudest voice that was being heard, but that everybody got to see that and they could understand the process for how we look to evaluate these projects. One interesting note that came out was one of the projects talked about was the Patriot Highway. You'll recall that was something that was discussed a few years ago. There's very little support for that. In fact, there was a lot of still people very against that concept of the project. That project really had a new route going largely through new land, not improving existing roads. And what we heard from a lot of the community is that they'd rather see us focus on improving the roads we have versus brand new alignments through the county. Asking the public those priorities, economic impact remain that top priority, but we see mobility and safety start to raise up a little bit higher as well. After the in-person meetings, we actually held a public online meeting that you could actually go online, zoom in on some county maps to make comments, provide input. Just everything that was provided to the stakeholders and to the in-person meetings was available online. We heard some common themes. One was some sort of outer loop, understanding that K7 435 shouldn't be the only ways to get around the county. Again, a lot of spot safety issues brought up. There was also little support for expansion of projects on the west side. The projects that was called like the East Lawrence Bypass or a new US 2440 alignment that would go from Tonganoxie west. It wasn't there was necessarily anybody against it, but they just weren't in support or really looking at those as priorities. I think when you look at some of those projects that have been out there a long time, you go back and see the new interchange that was built on KTA south of Tonganoxie that's relieved some of those issues and concerns that were thought of at that point. Online, asked to rank those priorities, safety actually became that top priority, followed by mobility and economic impact. This is the map that was actually shown to the public as well as online that identified all the previous projects that have been talked about. Ranging from new facilities to upgrading existing roads. You'll notice here we got a lot of corridors that somewhat overlap. We actually mapped out these 20 years worth of studies and some corridors that were on new alignments. We got a lot of feedback out of these, looking at the major facilities as well as we let people look at minor improvements to gather their input. That actually led, as we took a look at those projects, to what we call our consolidated project map, where we have 43 different projects that have been identified. Some of those projects could be combined. For instance, we have several interchanges that have been talked about along K7, converting at-grade intersections to those interchanges. You could look at those independently or in combination. We've also got some projects that could be divided. The 158th to 20th Street corridor certainly can be built in different sections depending on how that moves forward. I do want to point out a couple things just as we start to talk about projects later down. One of the large projects has been talked about is the Eastern Gateway project, that connection, that new river crossing over to 152 Highway. It's actually shown in two different segments. There's the segment from 435 across the river, tying in close to K5, and then the segment from K5 up to Eisenhower. When you start to look at those projects, what we call that north connection from K5 up to Eisenhower actually has very similar impacts with the extension over to 152 or upgrading K5. But if either of those two don't happen, then the improvements to that segment aren't really realized that you'll see. All total, we've identified out of these 43 projects about $1.5 billion worth of construction and project costs in today's dollars, with those projects ranging from less than $500,000 to over $350 million. So a wide range of projects as we look there. As we start to evaluate those, we talked about what we want to do is how can we calculate the impacts of these projects, and one of those ways is what we call travel sheds. And think about that as where you can actually get to in a set amount of time. This is an example that we're showing here of Lansing, showing going where can you get from the center of town in 10 minutes versus 20 minutes versus 30 minutes. We use this to actually measure what's the access to jobs, what's the access to employees for your businesses here that would happen if we build a infrastructure project. So we can start to quantify and calculate what are those differences as we move forward. And the example we provide here is the East Gateway with that new Missouri River crossing. With and without it, you start to see that overlap of how much more land is open to population, to employment centers, as well as to key destinations, education centers, community centers, parks, grocery stores, etc., when you build that. We're able to do this to quantify those impacts as we look at those and a lot of socioeconomic factors as we evaluate the projects. Speaking of evaluations, we'll go through these in a little bit more detail, but we focus on several different areas initially, and we've got some feedback. We're actually going to look at a couple of different things as we move forward. One is traffic operations and user delays. Safety is something we evaluate. Access to amenities and population, which really is a strong criteria when we look at some of the federal grants that are out there. Economic development and jobs access, equity, sustainability and resiliency, and then some other factors to consider. The number of communities that are impacted by the project. We talk about partnerships, how that makes it more attractive to people. We also talk about projects, what would the likely environmental clearance of those projects be? We'll go into that a little bit. That comes to play with a term we call project readiness. And that is how close is that project to actually being ready to start construction? That matters a lot, particularly with the federal grants. So if you think about the executive branch who oversees these grants, they want to be sure that if they award a project to a community, they're confident it's going to happen, and they're the last dollars coming to play. So while you might see grants, federal grants, the BUILD grant, the RAISE grant, et cetera, that offer the Tiger grant before, it goes by a different name with every administration, while you see those come forward, they want to be sure that they're that last dollar that gets happened so they can take, and let's be honest, take the credit for making a project turn into reality. Often those projects you'll hear have matches of 80-20 or 90-10, 80% federal money, 20% local. The reality of those federal matches is they often come in as 30% to 50% of the match. They're bringing in those last dollars and they want to spread their dollars as far as possible. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then we'll talk about capital costs and what that means, as well as operations and maintenance when you build a new facility. How do you maintain it? All of that will get input into this tool, and I know you can't really read this right now. Actually, we're developing an online portal to allow you to evaluate these, where you can change what your priorities are. So we talk about traffic operations, we talk about safety, access to amenities, etc. You can say out of a score of 0 to 100, what do you find important? What do you want a criteria? What criteria do you want to emphasize? And you can also focus in on what type of facility you're talking about. If we're talking about local safety improvements, if we're talking about upgrading some existing roads, that's not projects that are typically funded by the federal government. So let's screen those down to look at those elements. What we're trying to give you is the ability to really prioritize and focus on the different projects and the different funding opportunities that are out there. Talk about the metrics, go into some quick detail of how we evaluate projects. One is traffic operations and user delays. We're actually looking out into the future with Mark's regional model to understand what are the traffic volumes in the area and what's really going to be that change in daily vehicle hours of delay that happen as a result of adding this project. So if you build a project and we're reducing delays, we can calculate that and quantify that. We evaluate those and normalize that on a scale of 0 to 100 to give you the traffic operations and user delay. For access to opportunity and economic development, freight impacts, these are those travel shed conversations we talked about a few minutes ago. What is that change in access to population within 30 minutes? So if you build a facility, how many more people can get to your business, can get to your company within 30 minutes of time? The reverse of that is what's the average increase in jobs within 30 minutes? Building that project, how many more jobs are available to your residents? What's the increase in the number of destinations, key destinations, activity centers, entertainment venues, et cetera, that come to play? We talk about the increase in acres of commercial or industrial development that would come, as well as the number of census blocks close to an interchange. So if we're building a new interchange, what does that mean to really open it up and how many more people can get there? A couple other categories which are just yes or no is the project close to schools and is it close to parks and recreation centers? We evaluate that because when you look forward to some of those federal grants, again, those become questions you've got to answer, and we're just trying to help you answer that today. These categories we break up into two different scoring issues. One is that population amenity access score, which is the lighter tan color, the access to population, to key destinations, and the quality of life issues, schools and parks. Summing those values, normalizing them from 0 to 100. The other is the economic development. What's that increase in jobs access? What's that increase in acres of commercial or industrial development that you gain access with a project? And the amount of population and census blocks within 15 minutes of an I-70 interchange. So you start to see those factors. Equity is another area, and there are three different categories that are actually defined by the federal government. Those are areas of persistent poverty, historically disadvantaged communities, and opportunity zones. You may have heard of all three of those categories. Those three categories for equity only occur. Those are federally defined where those are. Those only happen in the city of Leavenworth itself. Nowhere else in the county do you have those three categories. So we start to see some of those impacts and what projects fall within close proximity to those three areas. We're able to take that and normalize that score as well for the equity score. For sustainability and resiliency, there's a couple different areas we're looking at, and some will go on that we're adding into this based on conversations we've had over the past month. One is that change in vehicle miles traveled. So if you think about if we build a project, people aren't going to have to drive as much to get from point A to point B. That's reducing pollution, reducing some of those issues, so that's a positive thing. The other thing we look at, is this a project that is going to make our infrastructure more resilient? Are we taking a bridge we know is nearing its life and replacing it? Are we taking a project that goes through a low water crossing that we can maintain during adverse storm conditions and people can use more times? Is the project located along a planned bike route? Or does it fill gaps in sidewalks and trails that might exist today? So we start to quantify those for each of the projects as well and are able to develop that sustainability score as we move forward. From safety standpoint, we've done a lot of research as a nation to understand if you do certain things, we can anticipate a reduction in the amount of crashes. For instance, if you add a shoulder to a road without a shoulder, or add rumble strips to the center line, that corresponds to a reduction in accidents. So we could take a look at the past 6 years of crash data that we have out there and actually look and estimate with these projects what's our anticipated reduction in crashes. Some of that because of the physical improvements you take. Some of it is diverting traffic if you build a new facility. And you, for instance, K5 or the Eastern Gateway is upgraded and you shift traffic off of K7, you might see a reduction in crashes because we have lower volumes because of that. We're able to quantify that as well to come up with our safety score. The other categories we looked at is those number of jurisdictions impacted. We've talked about that. The projected environmental clearance required, and this really comes to the NEPA classification we could anticipate. Not to say these won't change a little bit, but if you look at these, what projects do we think would be what we call a categorical exclusion? CEs are the lowest threshold or somewhat routine permits to get for a project. Minor projects, not a lot of acquisition of right-of-way, often fall into those categories. Environmental assessments becomes that next level. That's a more robust process of environmental screening. Often means you're acquiring a lot of right-of-way through the process to go forward. That project, those EAs can take 6 months to a year to get through that process. And then there are environmental impact statements, which really come to play, the EISs, when you talk about major crossings. Here, it's really major crossings of rivers. So new river crossings, things like that. Those environmental impact statements are often required in those projects. Those can be multi-year efforts to get through that permitting process. And then we take a look at the project costs in today's dollars, including estimates for utilities and right-of-way, contingencies, and then also what is that operating and maintenance cost going forward. We take those to actually come up with our other factors that we can evaluate these projects by. All that comes to play with the tool that we're able to take a look at and evaluate. And this is going to become available to you in the coming weeks online so you can see. It'll look a little bit different as we move from a spreadsheet to an online portal. But we'll make this available that you could start to screen what type of projects you want to evaluate and how you want to prioritize them. And you can see just as we look at these, what are those projects and how do they change if you move from one set of priorities to another. You'll start to see some projects shift up and down to different degrees. So what have we heard so far? We've had a lot of meetings with a lot of folks about these projects, both stakeholders and some of those key conversations as well as the local communities. There was that desire to look at both combining some projects. For instance, what if we talked about doing a mega project on K7 and doing all those interchanges at once versus individually? But also, can we look and think about what projects we could divide? We had a lot of conversation about cost effectiveness. So when you ultimately apply for federal grants, you have to do a benefit cost analysis. It's a much more laborious project, but we're able to estimate what are some of those issues and we can normalize that score. So next you'll see this. You'll see a cost effectiveness rating that you can take into consideration. So while it might be a great project, if it's extremely expensive, you can weigh that compared to where you might get a little bit more bang for your buck, if you We'll talk about additional information on resiliency. So we've a couple of the categories. We've talked about the low water crossings before. We've also talked about upgrading when we're paving gravel roads, so that we could talk about that as an added resiliency. We probably should take into consideration. Another conversation come up was adding, expanding what we determine as the economic impact. So when we looked at this and we talked about a project, we looked at what was zone commercial or industrial if we add a new interchange to I-70 or something like that, that would be in close proximity. So we looked at zoning and we looked at comprehensive plans to determine out what the communities in the county has planned for those areas. But then we took a step back. Next you'll see this. We recognize no matter what that zoning or the comprehensive plan says, quite likely if you build an interchange, in the vicinity of that interchange, you're probably going to see more economic impact, so long as we've got the other infrastructure and utilities that are supported. So we'll put an estimate on that. And finally, expanding freight access. We focused on I-70 as it was really that major freight corridor in Kansas. It's designated as the freight corridor in the state of Kansas. There was a desire, let's loop in I-435 as we gain access, either to improved access at K5 or with the Eastern Gateway, to make sure we're taking that into account as well. So with this, we're going to show you a few examples here. Initially, these will change as we continue to modify the tool a bit. But we wanted to show you, if we look at the priorities we heard from the stakeholders, and we look at the priorities from the public, what shifts as you look at projects? And what happens if you take all those into consideration? Our goal here, and as you set forward, you'll be able to screen these projects and understand. We'll give you these examples so you can see what some of your community said was important. We'll also populate in what the federal government, what KDOT, what Mid-America Regional Council, how they prioritize, so you could toggle those priorities and see how those ratings might change. By and large, what you'll find is while the different priorities change the scoring, typically you saw projects grouped together, stay grouped together. So maybe project number 1 goes to project 3 and vice versa. Those top few projects are really lumped together in different categories. So this is one example if we look at the public priorities, which rated economic development not quite as high, but safety higher than some of the other folks. Through that evaluation, the 158th, 155th Street corridor rose to the top. But you also saw K5, the Eastern Gateway, some of those projects were very close together in scoring as well. You take a look at the stakeholder priorities, which had economic development as a higher factor, safety a little bit lower, and you saw some of those improvements start to change and what those priorities are. So you'll be able to track this and look at these as we refine this tool and put it out there for everybody to digest. And then we looked at the combined, which again shifted a few things around, but you'll see those projects are all still in the same basic grouping as you move forward. So where do we go from here? We're hoping to have good conversations with you here this morning and want to get your input. With that, we will actually continue to fine-tune our evaluation and tools, see if there's other projects or other things we should be looking at, and issue, hopefully, in the next week or two, we'll have this open to the public for you all to play with this tool, to evaluate it, to understand it. We'll begin to prepare a draft report and be back in front of you late May, early June to present kind of our draft results to you for consideration. Our goal initially was to be done in late June. I think this meeting here this morning got pushed back a couple of weeks. It may be delayed a little bit longer than that, but again, with that target of KDOT's local consult this fall, we want to work. We're going to go to each of the communities one more time, so at the pleasure of the city councils and the commission here, we'll get on those agendas in June. It may spread into July before we're all the way through, but we'll get this through this summer. So with that, happy to take questions or dig into any of these issues you saw or any feedback you might have.
I have one. It's all right, madam. On the Eastern Gateway project, and maybe a lot of information, good information, I appreciate it. Was I reading it right that the economic potential for that was not as high as some of the areas?
Based on the evaluations we looked at, correct.
you're opening up a brand new road, and you're heading down north where people are going to be traveling a lot if it comes to play, if that's what everyone agrees. I can only imagine that it's going to be like when we opened up 2440 or when Lansing did put the exchange lane. I was a city manager at Lansing when they did that turn lane. We brought in 25 businesses just because people could get to a place easier and there was some more open ground. Maybe I'm just missing something here.
So the evaluation of the economic impact, actually, the Eastern Gateway project did rank very high. When you took a look at that, and if you were to combine it with the Northern Connection as well, it was one of the top scoring categories. We thought K5 ranked a little bit above it, as did the 158th and 155th corridor with the new interchange at I-70. But all of those were somewhat grouped economically in that same bucket there.
Okay.
I agree with you, Commissioner. I mean, with the industrial park on Eisenhower, and you would think it right higher than K5.
I don't understand how K5 would be higher than Eastern Gateway. It doesn't make any sense at all.
Sorry, what's that, sir?
I don't understand how K5 would score higher than Eastern Gateway at all in the economic portion of it. I mean, you're still going to end up at the Walcott Bridge if you improve K5. You're still going to you're only going to shave off like 1 minute to the airport. So Eastern Gateway would change that from 35 minutes to 6 minutes. So I'm not understanding some of the scoring.
Well, because not everybody has the same priority. I mean, this was based on public and business and
while access to KCI is certainly important, it's also just getting that enhanced access to the rest of the metropolitan area. So when you look at that travel shed and you look at all the areas completed, and not just the Mid-America Regional Council, we look western towards Lawrence and to Topeka as well. So as we evaluate those projects, the largest portion of employment in Kansas City is still south of the river, and the K5 also gives you a lot of access to that and makes that a little bit more convenient than necessarily 152 connection. But again, those are all very close to the same as far as how you look at that economic score.
Do you know what the time savings would be on the K5 improvement from where it begins and where it ends?
We can find that number for you. So the savings in traffic operations user delays, the biggest impacts have to do with upgrading the K7 interchanges. Just going because of those signal controls, the amount of delay those happen, the heavy traffic on that. Those become the first ones. Then K5 and Eastern Gateway are right behind that as new issues, helping reduce future congestion and future delay. So all of those score very highly and close together.
One other thing, too, Madam Chair, that you were correct. Years ago, I worked for the city manager in Lansing for years and blah, blah, blah. But bottom line is, 22 years ago, we got on a project to bring an airport into thing, and it was going good until the results came out, and then the cities started going in different directions. So your point about the cities and the county have to be one voice is so important for us to get any kind of funding whatsoever. And I hope that the other cities will be able to work, and I'm sure we will, because we got new elected officials. We'll be able to remember that, what happened to us when it cost us an airport 20 years ago or so.
Commissioner Smith, that exact example came up in one of our council meetings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Or?
Not at this time. Not at this time.
The first of many meetings we're going to have about this.
Good presentation.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Good job.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go on to our quarterly reports.
Oh, we got Bill here today? Oh, my
Information
goodness.
systems.
We won't be through till 5 p.m., Jesus.
Bill's still here.
Sorry.
Maybe he's gonna buy us
I
one.
guess I could have just started with Bill. I was spacing that out. I was just going in order.
Yeah. No, I just had to say that.
I'll try to be brief, which is my custom. We're currently short a position. That's of note. We've been short since about the first of the year. The individual that was supposed to return chose not to after his military leave, so I'm trying to fill that vacancy, which really stinks. Applications coming in they're not dazzling. So I'm struggling with that. Workload, of course, is up, which is always the case when you're shorthanded.
Yeah.
Workload goes up, people go down. Works out really good that way. We're working on refreshing the IT equipment for the appraiser's office. It's taking us a little longer than usual because we're shorthanded. And we're also delaying the district court refresh a little bit, hoping I can fill that position before we undertake them. They have a lot more computers and printers and everything else than the appraiser's office, so that will be a bigger project. We finished our design work on our network, so we're going to be putting that out for getting some quotes in the near future. And that will be the last of my ARPA-related projects. That's the last one of all those 10 or so. So that's going to be coming up. The high availability project that you awarded last month, that equipment has shown up. So we're going to be getting on the schedule to get all of that deployed and fired up down at Cushing. It's going to be wonderful. And the emergency responder project is still sitting on hold because of Spectrum dragging their feet. Like everybody else these days, it's so hard to get something done quickly. Other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for helping this challenged commissioner with his phone and setting up the new codes.
We're happy to help anybody that's struggling getting their passwords changed.
You're being kind when you're saying struggling. Okay, but thank you.
Larry did a while back. We had come across an issue with some phone companies. The one we had wouldn't connect with other phone companies. Did we get that all resolved? I mean, each phone company was saying it was the other one's fault. So I didn't know.
Yes, I believe the instance you're referring to was where AT&T customers couldn't call the county, but Verizon could, for instance. So there was a disconnect between the AT&T cellular network. The landlines came in, but their cellular network. And the problem is there's so many middle people between AT&T cellular network and then you get to Spectrum, which is who we have service through. There could be 2 or 3 different little carriers somewhere in the middle of that whole thing. And they all got to be on the right sheet of music. And they weren't. They had scheduled an update. I heard the whole babble. Somebody scheduled an update, then canceled it, but yet one of the players didn't cancel it, and they went ahead and pushed their update, and it broke it. Broke everything. So, yeah, that was resolved quite a while ago.
Okay.
Now, it could, of course, happen again at any given time.
Yeah, I haven't heard it lately, so it must be.
It's not happening right now. That has been resolved, and it will happen again at some point. It's just the nature of.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys are familiar with what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I sure do.
Yeah, we had a lot of people who couldn't call. They would get
We heard about it, yeah.
Can't be, connected at this time.
Yeah.
So they would think it was our fault, and we're looking at I'm calling it. It works. It only didn't work for a certain group of people.
Yep.
It was a very big pain. It lasted about a week, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We tried to call AT&T, in fact, but they wouldn't talk to me because I wasn't an AT&T customer. So I called Spectrum and said, no, our system's fine.
Yeah. That's the
So
other guy.
we had to tell the citizens, please call your provider, say AT&T, and complain, and then they'll maybe catch on after, I don't know, a few thousand of you call in. Hey, maybe there's a problem down there in northeast Kansas. Because you call Texas when you call AT&T, I think.
Mm.
You know how it is.
Yep.
Big mess.
Cool beans.
Well, anybody else have anything?
Nope.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks, Larry. Appreciate it, man.
See you, Mark.
Hi, Aaron.
Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
How are you guys?
Very well.
Great.
Thank you.
So, Buildings and Grounds Quarterly Report. Outside's lit blue for child abuse awareness for the rest of the month. Some of you might have heard the fire alarms got checked the last week or so we're good there. Lawn care's in full restoration mode, both at the Justice Center and out at the Health Department. Parking lot design is sent to the city for the Council on Aging parking lot that SMH was designing. As soon as we get word back from them that they'll approve it, we'll get it out for bid and then start working towards that project, which was the $550,000 grant that we received on it. We had our first issue as landlord of crisis stabilization, which was about a 2-day fun project. If you ever wondered what 2 boxes of dryer sheets can do to a drain, it's a bad plan. We are working with county admin on prioritizing capital projects. We have a Cleaver Brooks boiler over at the Justice Center that is reaching its end of life. The fire block on the inside needs to be replaced to the tune of about $26,000, or we can look to a replacement of our boiler system, which has a payback of initial investment on savings of about 7 to 10 years on gas savings. We're working through that versus the Sallyport for recommendations on that. Sewer District, we did our sludge test out at High Crest, and our highest level was 12 inches. We're sitting almost crystal clear with current water. You can almost see down, completely down. Alan out at Noxious Weeds has been working with us to keep our moss growth and that down with chemical treating. Other than that, we're moving right along as a department. Any questions?
How many years left in High Crest?
Well, currently with your sludge, you're sitting
in good shape.
You're sitting in really good shape. Cell 1, which is your intake cell, is the deepest at 12 inches, and then you rolled off to about 8 inches in the far corner. Then you're as low as 4 inches in cell 2. So sediment-wise and sludge-wise, you're still sitting in really, really good levels. Until we can get City of Lansing to keep growing out there toward Kenneth Bernard Park. You know, we could push that growth west as much as possible. We'd appreciate it. Commissioner Smith, if you could talk him into putting a pool out there, I'd greatly appreciate that.
Yeah, there you go. And grinder pumps, they're about normal.
Yeah, grinder pumps, we get about 1 or 2 a month that we have issues with. The alarm goes off.
Right. We
go out, it's either a replacement or it's a rebuild, put a rebuild back in and then replace moving forward.
So everything's going good then?
Correct.
As far as sewer districts?
As far as sewer districts, yeah. As far as buildings and grounds, we're moving right along.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you.
Anybody have anything else for Aaron?
I just
Thank
wish
you,
we were
sir.
out of the sewer district.
Thank you, Aaron. Yeah.
Thank you, Aaron.
Last but not least,
Our favorite. Our favorite. Come on down, Boo.
Save the best for last. We'll try to make this really brief since you guys have had a long meeting.
This last till noon, somebody said you were buying lunch.
Yeah, that's right. If it lasts till noon, I think I would have to buy you lunch. All right. So we'll start with the road and bridge. You guys have been doing a great job out maintaining the roads. They've hauled 47,000 tons of rock over the last quarter. We did haul in another 569 cubic yards of haydite. That's going to be stockpiled at the Tonganoxie Quarry. We have 113 miles of chip and seal scheduled for this summer. It's mapped, and that map's available on the county website. It's primarily the north third of the county. But if anybody does request that information, it is available underneath the Public Works tab on the county website.
Is that enough haydite to do all that? Or
should be enough haydite. We are not going to use limestone, so there is some natural lava rock that has been hauled into Kansas City on the rail that a company is selling now, and there's another company that's going to start hauling it in from New Mexico, from what we understand. So Vance Brothers and other contractors have started to buy this natural lava rock. And it's supposed to have the same properties and hardness and testing is Haydite. There's a Haydite availability has become an extremely competitive market, and the cost of it's going up, so its availability for a lot of these contractors with MoDOT and KDOT contracts is really eating up the supply of the one supplier. So the only issue that I see with it is that it's kind of a purplish color, but it still has the same properties as Haydite. It's just a natural Haydite. The stuff from New Mexico or southern Colorado that they're considering bringing in a large quantity to Kansas City as well is more of a reddish color than the deep purple, darker color, but should have the same qualities. It's not limestone that's going to be dusty and come off.
Does it absorb the oil at the same rate as Haydite?
It's supposed
30%?
Yeah, it's porous. And so Haydite is basically, it's a little less consistent than, because it's naturally occurring rock, than Haydite. Haydite's obviously blasted at the same temperature all the time, so you get a more consistent product.
Right.
But it's supposed to have the same properties and testing requirements as Haydite, so it would have to fall underneath the range of
about 30% absorption. Limestone's only 9%.
Right.
So that's why that stuff just
sucks it right off.
And you got it scheduled to get it striped right after it's ready to be striped, right?
Well, we'll stripe 3 times usually, approximately 3 times they'll come out and stripe. So we'll do a certain number of miles, usually about 40, and then they'll come out and stripe, and then they'll come back as they come through after about another 40, and then we'll finish up and they'll stripe again. So there will be periods where the roads aren't striped, but we do try to hit that 3 times and notify the striping company out of Iowa, I believe.
Because I know the Haydite's a better quality chip steel, but the fallback is it's hard to see at night once you put it on until you get it striped. So I just want to make sure we stripe it as soon as we can. Sounds like.
Yeah, we're trying. I mean, as much as we can do without trying to stripe anything ourselves. Obviously, that's a contracted service.
Yeah.
We get them to come back within reason. And that's another thing that's had huge inflationary costs, which is a common theme of a lot of things, but paint has gone way up. Just like chemical prices and noxious weed, it is considerably higher and seems to be a limited availability. So we did pre-order our entire year's worth of paint this year. They lock in a price so we would know what it was for budgetary purposes.
Be glad you don't need red. Red's 10 times higher than it was.
really.
Red?
Because it uses gold for the pigment.
I know for a while the glass beads and the striping were not available, and so MoDOT has a different standard than KDOT, and so KDOT had to accept MoDOT's standard there for a while with the glass beads because there was a limited supply of that product as well. We've replaced 34 culverts over the last quarter. The budgets are where you would expect them to be at the end of the first quarter. We would haul a lot of rock usually. Obviously, those middle 2 quarters, the 6 months in the middle of the year where we're doing a lot of asphalt and chip and seal work, that's when you're going to really see those budget numbers change. So we would like to be underneath that 25%, which we are. Road and Bridge has been working with different outside sort people and trying to get to the MSHA, the Tonganoxie Quarry, and we're working our way through that process to see how, if it's still a possibility to have some of our services, our hauling out of there be exempted and have the contractor inside of a designated quarry site. But we are going to continue to work over that on the next quarter, and we did provide our guys the 24-hour training, but we have not registered the county as a MSHA contractor, which we're trying to avoid. Currently just have the 2 vacancies. I think since this was produced, we actually have another vacancy. But vacancy numbers have been pretty consistently. We have a lot of turnover, not as much as we had, say, in 2021, but there's a consistent amount of turnover. We are registered as a CDL training facility, and so we guys CDLs, and some of them stay and some of them don't. From a project perspective, we still do have the retainage of 3% being held on the 158th Street project. We have communicated that we are not releasing that retainage to Lionel Weaver Construction. They did come out last week and rework some of the reel or the rutting that's coming down the 4-to-1 slopes and reseeded the site in most locations as you come off of the shoulder towards the initial ditch. That site needs to reach 70% grass growth in order for it to be accepted. If it does not, we'll continue to hold that retainage. If they decide they want to walk away from the project, we'll use the $90,000 to have another city contractor come in and work on that project until we can close our SWIP. We are still paying, and this is the issue that goes back to we need contractors to finish the job when the seeding window is open, because we are still paying for bi-weekly SWIP inspections, and every time we get a quarter-inch rain event, we have to have the inspector go out there. So the longer that the contractor drags this out and we don't have that seeding that we need to close the SWIP, the longer we have to pay for the project costs. HP 19 was constructed last year. We were holding the retainage. The grass has really popped up out there. The areas that the grass did come up, we are over 70%. There are a couple areas underneath the bridge structure itself, because the bridge has a very long approach to Stranger Creek because of the floodway, where the grass did not come up under the bridge. I don't know that the grass ever grows under a bridge, and so I would believe that site will be accepted. It does not get precipitation under the bridge, so I don't know, without watering, and then the grass would die anyway, so we will have that. We do have the bridges that Venice designed. There's a couple of those this past year. Donlinger did address the SWIP issues and reseed that site on E18 north of Easton, south of Easton last week as well. They used a lot of matting. And we have the ongoing F46 discussion as we figure out the load rating situation on that bridge. ST100 was bid. As you guys are aware, that project came back at $1.54 million, which was significantly higher than the original cost estimate from 18 months ago. And the county was responsible for an additional approximately $300,000 on that project. So it went from a 80-20 grant to a 65-35 or whatever that percentage exactly is. And so that project is moving forward. Eber Construction will be the contractor on that project. We are going to have a pre-con meeting in the next probably 10 days on that. And after that pre-con meeting, KDOT provided a pretty wide start window for that project. And so we'll have a better idea at the pre-con meeting when the contractor anticipates their start date, which we can notify the board and the public through Facebook. E48 is out to bid currently. We did receive notice yesterday that the weathered steel for the beams has some availability issues. We may need to push the project completion date back to from October 15th to December 10th in order for these contractors to be able to acquire the steel that they need for the bridge. We need to review the KDOT agreement. That is a local projects grant for the local bridge program. And so we need to ensure that we can get our $150,000 reimbursement at the beginning of that project, while the suppliers can still supply the steel. And so we need to verify that we're not just talking about two suppliers of steel, that this is an industry-wide delay for weathered steel, which we started to verify, and I have been emailing at the beginning of the meeting on my phone about. And so we're trying to verify that information. We do have the email chains from those suppliers, but we may have to put an addendum out to that bid. It does open May 2nd, and so we'll have the price on that project after that for your guys' review. Tonganoxie Road project, we have the office check plans. The review has been completed. We're waiting on KDOT's. We're going to send our review comments out this afternoon back to the design firm and try to get that project moving forward. I would anticipate over the next 2 to 3 weeks we will be fully engaged in the right-of-way acquisition process, and we do have some right-of-way acquisitions that are pretty substantial, at least on 2 properties that have very expensive decorative fences and gates that have internet connectivity and electrical connections that we'll need to work with the property owners to get moved back off of the right-of-way. County Route 30, that project is ready to be built. We have the outstanding grant application for the Kansas Cost Share program that we're waiting to hear back on. We also have applied for congressional spending from Senator Moran's office, and so that directed congressional spending notice probably will come out in the next, I don't know about a date, but maybe 30 days, and I would anticipate within the next 30 days the Kansas Cost Share program announcement will be made. Depending on the funding on those, the dates may change, but if we receive no grant funding for that project, we are intending on bidding it around Thanksgiving. And for some winter work, we'll have 2 culverts to replace, big box culverts, and some substantial grading, so that could be good winter work for some contractors to engage in.
And all that diggable rock.
Super easy to dig.
There's no rock.
It's unclassified excavation, so we're going to make sure that that's known in the bid documents that we are putting this in as unclassified excavation.
Surprise.
If that was like a mile west of there, that road is really nice and wide and easy, would be easy to replace. But then I got to thinking, actually, when you want to fix up a neighborhood, you want to start with the worst house first. So fixing County Road 30 would probably leave that nicer road to the west. So.
Well, I would imagine that section south, 2 miles south of Dempsey, from Dempsey to Hollingsworth, it has to be one of the most difficult sections of the road in the county. As hilly as it is, as rocky as it is, the road's not perfectly straight. We're going to realign the road so it is straight for the most part. And
It'll be a tough one.
The intersection for the next phase of the project at 4H Road is also very difficult. I would imagine that we're going to see a lot of rock. The difference of, and I mentioned this during the work session regarding the geotechnical information that was provided on this project, and we're going to need to keep an eye out for those loamy clays and see if we need some spot cement treated base on that project. In comparison with a different contractor in the due diligence that we're trying to design these projects to, I believe we did 31 borings in the next phase of the project in order to avoid that issue moving forward. So looking back, obviously hindsight's 20/20, but when those were engaged in the past under previous staff, the minimal 4 boring sites is not adequate for a 2-mile project. ST-26 is under design. That is the bridge on Fairmount Road going east of 175th Street. Currently, it is on the CIP for next year. HP 36 is nearly completed in design. We were trying to fit that into this year's bridge cycle. Based on the increased cost of these bridges and the availability of steel, it may end up falling into next year's. We do have 2 of the 3 right-of-way acquisitions that are required for the project complete. We have 1 property owner we're currently working with to try to finalize all right-of-way acquisition. And once that's complete, we could bid it, but we really need to see what the cost of E48 comes back at. Obviously, we don't want our bridge replacement fund or the 220 fund to be at or near zero at the end of the year. It would be better to do this first thing in the spring and bid it this next winter. K-19 is under design. We have not started right-of-way acquisition. We do have all the culvert projects that are out. We have 6 of those that we're contracting. We anticipate seeing those plans in the next couple of weeks and starting right-of-way acquisition for the ones that we do need additional right-of-way. 8 of those 14 culverts are going to be just regular 48 to 96-inch culverts and would be completed by county staff, with 6 of them being 5 of them are box culverts that are going to be concrete precast boxes, and 1 of them that's a 96-inch culvert that's 25 foot deep that we will contract. Biannual bridge inspection, we did review that spreadsheet during the work session, so if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. We just heard about the Regional Transportation Capital Improvement Study, Kimley Horn. Won't go into that. Spoke about the some of the Kansas KDOT cost share program or the governor's cost share program application. We do have the transit grant. Aaron's primarily working on that now. He helped with the paperwork at the beginning with Public Works, but he's going to construct that project moving forward. The HRRR, we have 2 outstanding applications that have been submitted, and we have not heard back on either one of those. They have done a call for projects for the next round of bridge grants, and so we'll be applying for bridge grants in the next coming weeks, probably the next 2 weeks. Noxious weed, they're out mowing. We mowed a lot more this winter. We had mowers that ran all winter, and so we were able to push a lot of right-of-ways back a lot further than they had been in the past. We'll see how that helps through the spring and summer, depending on the amount of rain we get, but hopefully we can keep all the tractors on the road and running. Obviously, we do have about 1,650 miles of ditch to mow, but we will continue to mow as much as possible. And we're starting to get really into the noxious weed season, and so we're going to be selling a lot of chemicals. Survey department, been doing a very good job. I included a map of Alexandria Township. We are down to about less than 10 section corners in Alexandria Township that need to be reestablished or more further evaluation needs to be completed, but we are nearing the completion in the coming weeks of our first township survey. And so it was something we started prior to Dan coming on board as the county surveyor under my license, and then he has taken over that job and done a very good job of putting that together. So I'd like to really point out that work. That's something that will be a living document signed by the county surveyor that should resolve a lot of boundary disputes. Because we did have numerous double corners and missing corners, and we've had to notify a couple surveyors that they set their corners in a manner that wasn't in compliance with state statute. So we've had to, you're going to probably see a replat or 2 come through where the people had to fix their old surveys that were done incorrectly. And so really something that's good.
Got the Delaware Reserve line that goes through there.
Yep, we've been surveying that. Some areas they surveyed up to it. That's a whole another discussion. But yeah, the Delaware Reserve line. Bless you.
Thank you.
So we'll probably move north. We have part of Easton already done, Easton Township, and then we'll probably do Kickapoo because Alexandria, Easton, and Kickapoo were the 3 townships that had the most missing or double corners. Fleet management continues to work through availability issues and activity issues and different, just a lot of issues in order to get all the vehicles with the supply chain problems that we've been seeing over the past couple of years. We are nearing full implementation of a lease system or a lease plan on our vehicles, and should have a steady budgetary number that we have been able to budget without repairs for the most part because all the vehicles are under warranty. We did provide the 2024 numbers to the clerk's office, and so that will be reflected in the budgets that you guys review. GIS continues to do all of their mapping duties that obviously that they're responsible for with the appraiser's office. They continue to work with NG911 and in the dispatch center. We have done some additional drones. Soma did receive her FAA license, so we are fully compliant to fly our drone that we purchased anywhere we need to. We did move the data from the GIS server and migrated a lot of that data with the IS department and Larry over the past quarter, which was a pretty large undertaking. And we continue to map road records. I'm not going to list every single thing on the project sheet. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Busy time, really.
So when will we hear about the 235th matching?
Well, the Kansas Cost Share Program hasn't provided an announcement date, but I would assume that would be within the next 30 days. From just watching these over this current administration, It seems like the people who are going to get the grants seem to know about it before the grants because they jump around on a Facebook Live feed to a lot of the different locations. So hopefully someone will reach out to us before the announcement. If we haven't heard anything by the announcement date, generally you're not getting money. So that, and then the directed congressional spending that we've applied for, I would assume the next 30 days on that, but I do not know. They have not provided us any earmarks, so I don't know what bill is going in the U.S.
And on that project, I mean, there's going to be definitely a shortage of dirt.
On that project?
Yeah. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I don't know.
On quantities?
I couldn't name it off the top of my head, but I would assume there's one section that has like a 12 or 13 foot fill through a valley, and we don't cut the hill down at the cemetery because you couldn't.
Right. So
couldn't balance the size of the cemetery.
No, I was going to say it'd be hard to balance it. But is there a possibility that when we bid it, could we offer dirt out of the quarry for that project? Was that legal to do?
I believe it'd be illegal now that we're inspected.
Right. Well, I'm just saying to keep the cost down of this project, and I mean the quarry's got a lot of available dirt. It's good dirt. But that's kind of a distance too. It's a lot easier to go dig on somebody's property and do a borrow site, probably. But then you're going to run into the rock too. So.
I believe we offered that
on
the 178th Street project a couple of years ago for dirt because we had a lot of overburden that we were moving at the time. The contractors elected not to use it because they were able to get it right there on site. Which this would be a lot shorter distance for a haul route. But
yeah, because even on a borrow site, you're going to run into rock.
Out there you are.
Out there you are. So, but something to think about.
Yeah, it's about 10 miles.
Hmm?
It's about 10 miles to the quarry.
From where?
There.
Not from the project we're going to be bidding.
How far is it?
Should only be about 4.
Oh, the south end.
Yeah, the south end. Yeah.
I was thinking about the cemetery, all the way up to the cemetery. You talking about
Friends? No, we're talking about the Eagle Cemetery.
Oh, okay, I was thinking Friends Cemetery. There's another cemetery.
Yeah, there's another cemetery on the north end.
Okay.
Does anybody have any other questions for Bill? Let's let him get back to work. We've kept
him long enough, and we're not going to be able to squeeze lunch out.
Yeah, thank you guys.
We tried.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, well, now we're down to additional public comment. Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know I'm standing between you and lunch.
You're fine, welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. Eric McMillan from Easton Township. Happy Patriots Day. As I was putting my comments together, I noticed that today is the 248th anniversary of the battles of Lexington and Concord, which started our War of Independence and the shot fired around the world, as it's been called, and ultimately preserved our right to have representative government like this meeting, somewhat long meeting this morning. And the historian in me just had to mention something. I think there's a couple history buffs on the commission, too, so I'd say something. I would like to thank the Board of County Commissioners for keeping in place the YouTube comments on this meeting, both streaming and recording. I think it was a move for transparency for county government, and I think many citizens in the county applaud it. I would also respectfully request that you keep the momentum going for transparency. I think probably the biggest issue, the most passionate issue out among citizens now is looming tax increases. And I would say the next place to look at increased transparency, keep this momentum going, is transparency with the budgeting process. People are thinking, last summer we had a double-digit on average tax increase, and I think there's a lot of interest, particularly amongst senior citizens. The meeting hosted by Commissioner Stephen and Commissioner Culbertson last Thursday in Tonganoxie was to a capacity crowd. I got there a little bit ahead of the meeting start. It was already full room. Chairs were being brought in from the rest of the library. A lot of interest, particularly amongst our seniors. I think there's also increasing awareness that the mill rate set by the BOCC for county levied taxes is the most immediately controllable variable in the equation of county levied taxes. So that gets how do we increase budget transparency. I emailed each one of you a copy of this presentation. I'll hold it up as a camera. And I think many of you have looked at it. It contains a lot of suggestions and perhaps a roadmap for increased transparency for the budgeting process. A first step, I would say, would be engaging and publicly reporting on discussions between the BOCC and the county departments on ways to hold the line or manage spending going into the new tax year. This was suggested back on January 25th by my fellow concerned citizen, Wes Baker, who is one of the lone survivors here in the meeting today. And I think it was a good idea, a good first step. I would say the next and most important step would be to publish the detailed proposed county budget, including department-funded agency budget narratives, basically that big binder that each of the commissioners get kind of at the beginning of the summer. I would say my request would be please publish this information on the county government website so that it's available to all the citizens and taxpayers. Finally, I would ask that you consider to hold at least 2 town hall meetings with interaction between the full BOCC and the public. The first of these I would recommend take place at least 2 months prior to the anticipated revenue neutral meeting. The second one in the time after the first. I think these steps would be concrete measures showing good faith and transparency to the taxpayers of the county. I think they would also lessen that feeling of we, them, or have not that is part of perceptions of some, and instead signal a more friends and neighbors approach, collaborative between the county and the citizens on the budgeting process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Okay. Now let's see if there's been any activities by the commissioners over the past week or so. Let's start with Commissioner Culverson.
I don't have anything out of the ordinary to report.
Last week. Do you want to talk about that at all? I know that isn't
The town hall.
Yeah.
That he's talking about. So Tonganoxie Library, Commissioner Stevens started he calls it a task force. It's basically the locals or the constituents in his area get together and talks about separate issues. Whatever issues are affecting taxes is basically the theme. So it changes constantly. And there was quite a few people there, like Eric said, 50 to 100. And I think, had such a high turnout because the evaluation notices just went out. And
that
so
makes sense.
we try to just go over, we don't really have an agenda. We just kind of field questions as they pop up and then try to explain things to the taxpayers. And 80% of the time, I think it's mostly people just don't understand how things work. And so just explaining how things work. Problem is, the answer to how things work here in our county and our state don't make them feel much better.
That's not a good answer.
But at least they understand what the problem is. So
Yeah,
that helps a lot. And then I've been back and forth with the Karen Tyson task force. Senator Haley I've talked to about the House Bill 79. That's the switch from property tax to income tax, 1%. And, if people would just understand the numbers, I think they would be amazed. With a 1% income tax for Leavenworth County, we could cut your property taxes in half. And I don't know how to express that any stronger. I mean, the biggest issue people always call us about is taxes, lower my taxes. And here, staring us in the face is House Bill 79 that would cut your property taxes in half with a 1% income tax.
If it came back from the state.
Yeah, well, and it would 79 wasn't exactly what I would call the ideal bill to do this. It only required 50% of the income tax to be used toward property tax. It needs to be 100%.
It has to be 100%.
Yeah, there's several things in it. But what I'm excited about is 4 years ago, that would never even been presented.
Yeah,
So
that's
at
true.
least,
That's true.
over the last 4 years, I've got some momentum
Yes,
in
sir.
our state legislators understanding what Leavenworth County's specific problem is, let alone the state's, and how to fix it. And there are ways to do it, but until all of our representatives understand how to fix it, it's not going to get fixed.
And our county's unique, and we need help.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the biggest thing.
Thank you.
That we're doing.
Madam Chair, just a couple of things. First of all, I'm glad Senator Pittman came in. He had a lot of good information. I appreciate him taking the time to come speak with us. Next week, Commissioner Stephen and I, for the most part, will be at the County Commissioners Annual Conference in Hayes, and again, we'll be talking about demand transfers and all the things going on, making sure all the newly elected commissioners, which they seem to be a lot, turnover, try to help us. And as Doug's point is, that we need help from other folks, not just here in our own, which would be nice to have some in our own. The other thing is, on a brighter note, on May 6th, for all the little ones, there's the 22nd Annual Fishing Derby out at Bernard Park. It'll start at 9 and have lunch at 11. It's about $5. And for many years, I've been manning the grill, and I will be doing so good. So come out and have yourself a hot dog. Thank you.
You want to, okay, let's see. I'll go ahead and let you go.
Is that the Mel Hedrick Fishing Derby, or is this a different
No,
one?
it's a
No,
different
it's different.
one.
City
It's
Lansing
out
puts
in
this on.
Lansing.
Yeah, City Lansing puts this on.
Mel Hedrick.
And the one good thing about it, for all people to know, is usually a day or two, we get the fish, a lot of fish from the state, and they're suicide fish because we don't feed them. So they go in there, and when they come out, anything that's thrown out there for the little ones, I mean, it can be anything, you're going to have them going after it. So it's a good event for the small kids to bring in. Maybe it's the size, but still it's a good event for them to come out.
You did attend the ribbon cutting, did you not, for the...
Oh, yeah, Doug and I.
No, I didn't make it.
No, that's Mike, I'm sorry, I sure did. Attending a ribbon cutting on the intersection of Eisenhower and 4th Street or Main Street, depending on which side of the street you're on. Had a good turnout. Mike Stephen was there, and Senator Pittman was there, and it was just a nice turnout. And more important than that, I'm glad it's open. So thank you, Vicki.
What was the
for
delay
letting me-
on that project? Wasn't that supposed to be open in Thanksgiving last year?
Yeah.
There was
I don't have a good
delay.
answer.
Not our project, so
Okay. Well, I thought it was.
not on Monkey or Circus. Go ahead.
All right. That's Bayshore City Council last week. The 4-H thing this Saturday night down at Tongi at the fairgrounds. Does any commissioners attend?
But you're going, right?
I am.
Yeah, I won't be there.
Okay. I don't know if Commissioner Stevens is or not. And let's see, next week got the Mid-America Regional Council meetings next week, isn't it?
Yeah.
Next Tuesday. And that's about it.
Okay, well...
Because the JCAB's moved till next week.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Good call. Okay, I attended in the child abuse prevention breakfast last Thursday morning, and participated in the Port Authority meeting yesterday, along with the Transit Authority Finance Committee meeting. I chaired that meeting yesterday. And then I'm going to be going to the Alzheimer's Research Center
I'm going to try to make that.
film premiere.
I'm going to try.
Just let people know tomorrow. Remember, at 6:30 tomorrow at the First United Methodist Church, as a reminder.
That's just right over here, isn't it?
Yes, it's just right across the street there. And then next week I will be participating in Workforce Partnership meeting on the same day as you guys will be doing the Mid-America Regional Council, and then back again to doing the Transit Authority work. So that's what I have going on. And do you have anything else for us today, Mark?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, second. Call it, starting with Commissioner Culberson.
Aye.
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 Motion carries. We are adjourned.